In 2013, there was a study that came out from Stanford and NYU, and it was the first independent study of the effects of drone strikes on civilians in northern Pakistan. This is one of the readings from an attack. So at least 13 killed, including 2 named Taliban. Women and children reported among casualties, Baghar, South Waziristan. The data set looked like this. And so what happened with this project was I read the report, it came out, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of crazy, because before this report came out, John Brennan was head of CIA, and he was saying, that our drones campaign it's precise, it's like laser focused, like Star Trek. Like, we're just going out and taking out these bad guys, and there's very little collateral damage, and we're not losing any US soldiers in this process. And then the report came out, and the report was saying, no, this is now Taliban's #1 recruiting tool for recruiting new soldiers to fight against us. So we're kind of creating more enemies in this process. And I reached out to Stanford and to one of the law professors who wrote this and conducted the study, and I was like, where can I get the data set you've been using? And he connected us to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in London. They've been collecting this data, and what happens is northern Pakistan is a pretty wild region of the world for a lot of reasons. But if a drone strike happens there, it's not like you have a lot of birth certificates you can compare it to, or you have any sort of census information. A drone strike happens, and there's a lot of different stories that people have about who died, where it is, were they involved. And you have all these news and media organizations that'll go there to that spot. Al Jazeera, CNN, AP, Reuters. And the Bureau would contact any news agencies that would go to these spots, collect that information, and then document it. And then what they would do is, we have a region, we have an identifier, we have a date, you see sometimes ranges. We know approximately how many people kill, like this is our range. You also have civilians. A civilian is any woman or elderly men. Because any male between the ages of 14 and 40 is in alleged military combatant. And that was defined by Bush and then Obama. And so you have those information, then you have the sort of meta information here. When you look at a data set, and this is kind of something I always try to do from like this personal level, this is not human. This is a digitized copy to try to document something. How do you rehumanize this so people understand the issue? And this is something that we put upon ourselves. There's a timeline here. There are these lines that come out through the top. What each one of these squares represents is a fatality. Somebody killed. And you can also see, I'll back up a little bit here and see if you can see this. At the very top, you have these groups. It's sort of like a stacked bar graph. You have children, civilians, and this other group. And the other is the alleged military combatants. And then you have a little white box over there. And that white box are people that we could actually identify as potential threats to the US. Taliban commanders, Al-Qaeda commanders, any sort of leadership that might have been a target in this campaign. And so the Bureau gave us all the data sets here, but then we looked for an opposite party type of data set to justify that. And it was like the American Legions of Freedom. It was some very conservative group that really supported the drone campaign, because we wanted to find this other data set to counter and like, okay, well, let's try to justify this. Because if 98% of these fatalities were commanders of some sort, maybe we could justify it. But we couldn't. And so what we did with this was we built a narrative, and it builds out. So this is, I coined this word data dramatization. So we're using data and we're dramatizing it in a way to tell this story. The cool thing about it is like, it's our project. We don't have clients telling us what to do. We don't have any feedback. We get to make those shots. And so we built an animated piece that actually builds out with this. And one thing about this is each a month. So this is people killed in a month. It looks like blocks here, but that's actually dark red. What we have here actually, like one of the techniques that we did, again, you can barely read it, but you'll be able to see it more when we look at this, is this is a bar graph that's flipped upside down. So when that bar graph is flipped upside down, it's going down, but basically it's going into the ground. And so with the animations, you'll have these lines that come down and they hit. It's an explosion, and then you have this graph build below it. The lines, whenever they come from the top, they actually come from random places in the top. You don't ever know where they're coming from. Like that's something we build into the code that we do because it's part of a metaphor. Does everyone realize that? No, but we do. It's like there's everything is like thought through and how we do that. But what I'll do is I'll give you the URL and play it through, and then when we're done, we'll take a break. So it's drones.pitchinteractive.com. There's no audio. When we did this project, it took us about 4 or 5 weeks to build from start to finish. We didn't get paid a dime for it. You can also see we don't have our logo flashing on it anywhere. Like, I just don't like that. You can click on the info section, and that gives you our methodologies, our data sets, anything that inspired us, and then finally, who did it. It's really important for us, like sort of our culture is like quiet confidence. Like we like to be more under the radar instead of like beating drums and stuff like that. But we launched it soft launched it on a Friday. I told a friend who worked at The Guardian in the UK, and I was like, hey, you have first dibs on this. And he was like, yes. And he had a few questions for me. Come Monday, I woke up and it just blew up everywhere. Like I thought the first day would get like 20,000 hits, and it was like 2 million something. It ended up in like Iranian news, Pakistani news, all these documentaries in Germany and Sweden and the UK. I had a nervous breakdown by the end of the week because I was doing all these interview calls, and we didn't have a press kit because we're a small studio and we weren't thinking about things like that. I gave one interview, and it was through my computer camera, and there was a broomstick behind me. And you could tell I'm like frazzled, completely worn out that week. But it was an awesome thing to have, like to do this and then like, wow, this is actually getting out there. It got on Reddit. There were a couple trolls. I think one guy was like, well, you can kind of see at the end, you can't see in this case, but at the end it kind of like comes up, like it's reduced. You need to show that, because that's showing it's gotten better. Because you're showing everything, you're misrepresenting the data set. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm not understanding that logic at all. Somebody from India contacted us, was really angry because this was Pakistan, not showing what Pakistan is doing in Kashmir with the drones that we gave them, because these drones are also flown. They're lifted off and they land in Pakistan soil on US air bases in Pakistan. There's a reason why we give Pakistan so much money. And so we fly these drones from there, so there's no international border conflict. And then when the drones are retired, they're given to Pakistan military, Air Force. And then they can do with them what they want, and they do. So it's a pretty dirty campaign. For me, it was a big shock, because before we did this project, I had no idea. I do a lot of things outdoors. Like, I'm a rock climber, I climb mountains. I'm trying to go up to Shasta this weekend, but there's avalanche danger, so maybe I won't. Just kept trying to figure out what to do with that. But so one thing that I'd learned about 1.5 years ago is that California has about 20 glaciers, which is pretty cool. Some of those glaciers are growing, particularly on Mount Shasta. Most of them are receding, and technically most of them aren't even glaciers anymore, especially the ones in the Sierras. So this is one glacier in Mount Shasta that I went up to last summer. So we have this project on just focusing on California glaciers, and we're working with Yosemite's chief geologist, Greg Stock, who he was going to bring me last September with a crew that went up to Lyell Glacier. They go every year to document it and record it. They take some samples, they take lots of photos. It snowed 2 inches 2 days before we were gonna go, and you cannot climb talus fields with a little bit of snow unless you wanna lose your legs. It was way too dangerous because this is like wilderness. There's not trails or anything like that. You actually have to like technically get up there and stuff. And so what we've been doing in our studio is we have this glacier data. We're talking to hydrologists, glaciologists. We're not dependent on our glaciers though, like for our survival. Not like in South America. There's a lot of countries or a lot of areas that really depend on those glaciers being intact to grow their farms and whatnot. Our glaciers are much more for cultural purposes. It's, if you think the polar bear. If the polar bear goes extinct, who does that really affect? But it's a sign, it's a symbol, it's a message that we're losing something that's not renewable anymore. And I think with our glaciers as well, these are things that are going away from us. And by some estimates, it won't take very long for like this one, the Palisade Glacier, to pretty much be gone. And by being gone, like, yeah, there will be a snowpack and it will come here. But at the bottom of this glacier underneath, you have ice that's hundreds of years old, sometimes thousands of years old. And that ice is going away. And when it goes away, there's no more. And then we have a lot fewer glaciers and ice packs in California. So what we do is we've taken these glaciers and we've kind of mapped them out in different ways. There's elevation. This is a really interesting one I want to go to, but it's so far out there in the wilderness. Lilliput, it's the smallest glacier. And to collect data, basically scientists fly over it to eyeball it, because just the hiking to get there will take several days of off-trail, pure wilderness travel, and you really have to know wayfinding and how to get there and what the area is going to be like. And these are, what I'm showing you are more of like concept design works that we're doing as well. So we have the data and like, how do we communicate it? This is another one of the glacier on the start, and you can see up there, there's sort of like a photo with an overlay. And we're using like newer technologies with this, like VR. Like I will go up and have a little 360 camera, and I'll shoot it from different locations of the glacier. So you can actually use VR to like be there, because you can't expect people to come up and appreciate this without being in shape and training and whatnot. We also have an ambassadorship with Planet Studios, which is their satellite company based in San Francisco. And they have hundreds of these little micro satellites they call doves. And here's the Earth, and they're circling around the Earth, taking a picture of the Earth every single day. And so what we have, what we built from that is this tool. It's like, this is a day, like let's say a year ago, and this is closer to today. And then you have this tool where you have these satellite images from a year ago and today, and you can swipe them to kind of compare it and zoom into these pictures. All these dots are glaciers. The red means that they're receding. The green is the one selected. And you can go in there and actually swipe back and forth. You can be like, well, what was it like a year ago? Because measuring glaciers is also a very complicated task. You can't just say, oh, this glacier is this big. It's this big this time of the year. But really, to measure glaciers, you measure them in late September before the winter season starts again, because that's like the rawest sort of snow that's going to be there. This is just like another visual of that. So it's important, again, to do these personal projects. And we have many personal projects like California reservoirs that never even saw the light of day. They're just like experimentations. You don't have to get out there and be famous for what you do. It's just sometimes it's a matter of doing this work so that you can talk about it and understand it and be intimate with it.